Welcome to the Christian Business Concepts with your host, Harold Milby. Christian Business Concepts is dedicated to guiding companies and business owners in becoming effective, efficient, and successful through God's Word and godly principles. Now, here's your host, Harold Milby.
For that intro, Kelly, and welcome everyone to this week's episode of Christian Business Concepts. I'm so very glad and humbled that you've chosen to listen to this podcast and be a part of the CBC community. You know, my hope and my desire, I say this all the time, but it truly is, my hope and desire is that you'll be encouraged, empowered, and enlightened by today's episode, and that it truly helps you find true godly success. And let me ask this of you too. If this podcast is ministered to you, please write a review, invite others to be a part of our CBC family. Before we get into today's topic, I'd kind of like to give a big shout out to the country of Sweden for all of the downloads that they had this week. So thank you, Sweden. We really appreciate you people there, and you guys are fine folks, and we're so glad that you're a part of Christian Business Concepts. Let me get into the topic today. I got a lot of things I want to cover, and I just want to share with you some really good things. So first, let's talk a little bit about leading a team or an organization. If you're a leader, if you're an owner of a business or an organization, or maybe you're a leader within an organization or a company, if you've done it for very long at all, that it can be very challenging. And especially when you're faced with difficulties, when you're faced with opposition. However, I believe that it's during these moments that true leaders emerge. Because I think that as a true leader, you have to demonstrate courage and boldness. And as Christian leaders especially, it's during these moments that our faith should guide us to demonstrate this courage and boldness. So today, I want to talk about leading fearlessly. I want to talk about embracing challenges and opposition with courage and boldness. So I want to talk a little bit about that opposition. I want to talk a little bit about some of the challenges that we may face. But more importantly, I want to talk about strategies for leading fearlessly. A lot of times we can be opposed by people maybe in our industry, where that they don't maybe like the direction that we're going. We get bad press, or we have competition that talks bad about us, and they try to force us into making decisions that we really don't feel like we need to make. So sometimes you can be opposed by industry leaders. Sometimes you can be opposed by company leadership within your own company. When you're trying to make really important decisions, you can find opposition within your own, organization. And then sometimes you can find opposition within employees, those that you lead, those that work for you. And a lot of times they want to oppose your decisions. They don't like your decisions. Maybe they oppose maybe some organizational changes that you want to make. Or they really kind of challenge you with a lot of criticism. When I think about that, I think about Moses and his leadership role with the children of Israel. They had gathered themselves together against Moses and against Aaron, and they said unto them, and this is in Numbers chapter 16, verses 2 and 3, it says, "You take too much upon you, seeing all the congregation are holy, every one of them, and that the Lord is among them. Wherefore then lift you up yourselves above the congregation of the Lord." So they were really kind of criticizing them. They were challenging them because they had went up on the mountain of God, and they were getting the Lord to speak to them. And of course, Moses came down with the 10 Commandments, and we know a lot of that story of what had happened. But we fail to realize is that he was highly criticized. Moses was highly criticized, and Aaron was highly criticized because, the people looked at them like, well, you act like you're the only one that knows what's going on here, but we know what's going on too. And you take too much upon yourself to be this supreme leader. But as a business owner or the leader of an organization, the one thing that I've always tried to help and encourage employees to understand is that when you are a leader, you see a lot more than what they see. So they don't understand the things that you're trying to do, and nor do you have time to explain all of those details to them. But as you make those decisions and you make good decisions, hopefully your employees will begin to learn about you and learn that they can trust you in the decisions that you make. But a lot of times we face that kind of opposition, and there are times that we face challenges. I'll tell you, when I was a pastor, and I pastored all those years, and the first church I pastored, I remember that I had been an assistant pastor for a while. I didn't preach every Sunday, and I preach, maybe once a month or what have you. But when I became a senior pastor, one of the challenges that I had was trying two things. Number one, I had to stand in front of people and I had to speak 2 or 3 times a week. And another challenge that I had, besides just public speaking, was the fact that I was concerned about how in the world am I going to preach this many times, to teach this many times over a period of a year, and have enough information to do and have new messages, fresh teachings on a regular basis. So that was a real challenge for me. I was really concerned about that. And I think if I had let that challenge overtake me, I think I maybe would not even have accepted a position as a senior pastor. But I had to overcome that. And I had to lead with courage and boldness. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. So you need to understand courage and boldness first. So courage, in the face of opposition, courage refers to the ability to confront challenges head on, despite fear, maybe uncertainty. And despite those things, you confront those challenges and you move forward. It involves taking calculated risks sometimes and standing up for what you believe is right. Now, let me say this. Courage is not the absence of fear. Now, a lot of people think that. They think, well, if you have courage, you don't have any fear. That's not true. It's far from it. But courage is the recognition of the fear and then having the decision to move forward despite it. And so courage, keep in mind, is not the absence of fear. Mark Twain said, courage is resistance to fear, mastery of fear, not absence of fear. And so understand that. I don't want you walking away thinking, well, I can't be very courageous because I have fear in my life. I fear this or I have a fear of that. It's not the absence of fear. It's actually the recognition of that fear and then moving forward anyway. Now, boldness complements courage because really, when you think about it, boldness really kind of embraces a lot of things. It embraces innovation. It embraces thinking way outside the box. It really embraces challenging the status quo. It involves taking decisive actions, making tough decisions. In fact, if you look up the definition of boldness, and I found this on dictionary.com, it has fourfold meaning or definition of boldness. Number one, it's the lack of hesitation or fear in the face of risk or danger. Number two is a refusal to be held back by the opinion or judgment of others, because there's a lot of times people live in fear of what other people think. They're worried about how they'll be judged, and so they base decisions upon that. Number three, part of the definition is a lack of regard for the rules of propriety or morality. And then number four, the fact or quality of going beyond the usual limits of conventional thought or action. It's an imaginative character. And so when you think about boldness and being bold, there's so much in the Word of God. There's so many characters. There's so many people that we can see examples of boldness. Proverbs 28:1 says, "The wicked flee when no man pursues, but the righteous are as bold as a lion." As you're a leader, whether it's a business owner, whether you're a leader of a church within some other organization, or you're a leader of a department, you've got to learn to be bold. This word bold in Proverbs 28:1 is a Hebrew word, baltak, and it means to trust and to have confidence and be secure. And I think that really speaks to us today if we're going to be bold. Because being bold means that we do trust. It means we trust in the decisions that we make. And as born again believers, we have a trust in the mighty God, in the God that we serve. We have the trust that we have in Him. It's the confidence that we have in ourselves. It's the security that we have for being a child of God, and we're secure in that. And I think I've shared with you before. I don't know how my life would have turned out if I hadn't been a child of God, if I hadn't accepted Jesus Christ as Lord of my life, because honestly, I don't think I would have been as bold as I am. I don't think I would have been as courageous or if I'd been as secure and confident as I am. I get that from my Lord. I get that from the God that I serve. Hebrews 4:16 says, "Let us therefore come boldly unto the throne of grace, that we may obtain mercy and find grace to help in time of need." I don't have to go to God crawling on my hands and knees and just begging Him and maybe He'll help me, but I can come boldly to Him and say, "I'm a child of God. I need your help." And there's been many times in my career where that I have reached out to God and say, "God, I need some help with some decisions here, and I need to make some pretty strong decisions, and I need your help. I need to know what decisions to make, and then when I make them, I need your help to be bold and to be confident to make those decisions." So to do that, I think to be courageous, to lead with courage and boldness, first, I think you have to develop a courageous mindset. I think you have to have a mindset that speaks to you about being courageous. I think that means that you have to be self-reflective. You've got to understand your own values, what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are. You've got to identify your fears. Don't suppress them. Don't try to hide them. But you've got to identify them and identify those insecurities that may be hindering your ability to lead courageously. And then the other thing is, there's a lot of people who have very negative self-talk. So they really, within their minds, they talk very negatively about themselves, and they have very negative self-talk. You've got to train your mind not to talk negatively within yourself and towards yourself. I mean, if you look at the children of Israel, and when they got to the promised land, Moses sent 12 spies to spy out the land. And, 10 of those spies came back. And they came back and they said, "Yeah, you know what? We can't take this land. We can't." And when you read what they said, one of the things that they said, "We are as grasshoppers in their eyes," in the inhabitants of the land. He said they're giants. He said, these 10 spies, they said, we can't overtake this land. Now, Joshua and Caleb, they knew exactly what was going on. They had 10 people with several million people listening to what the spies had to say. And they knew if they didn't do something quickly, that this whole thing was going to be for nothing, that they weren't going to go in and take the land. And what happened was they said, Jeremiah and Caleb, or not Jeremiah, I'm sorry, Joshua and Caleb said that, "Hey, we can go up and take the land. Let's go do it right now." But what happened is that what they said, the negativity, what those 10 spies said, it discouraged everybody else in the camp, all several million people. And so they didn't go in and take the land, and they wandered around in the wilderness for 40 years. So it's because of how they saw theirself. And that's what I'm talking about when I talk about self-talk and how that we talk negative. We have negative self-talk. These people had negative self-talk. They didn't believe they could do it. And now 40 years, you fast forward 40 years, they go in and they do exactly what they should have done 40 years earlier. They were able to do it. They had the ability to do it. But at the same time, because of what they said, I mean, when you think about it, God told Joshua to march around the walls of Jericho. And he said, I don't want you to speak. I don't want you to say a word. I want you to walk around that city once every day. And on the seventh day, I want you to walk around it 7 times, and I want you to not say a word. And I believe that he knew and he understood that because they had such bad self-talk. He didn't want them walking around the walls of Jericho talking to each other about, why are we doing this? We're never going to be able to overtake this city. We're never going to be able to defeat these people. This is a walled city. It won't happen. We can't do it. And by that end of the first day, as they walked around this city, I'm sure if that had happened, they would have walked away. There never would have been a second day of walking around that city. Now, we know that they did exactly what God told them to do, and they did. The walls came down, and they took that city. And I believe a lot of it was because of the fact that they kept their mouth shut. So you've got to be able to deal with the self-talk. You've got to build some resilience. You've got to cultivate that kind of a bounce back, from any kind of setback that you have. You got to learn from those failures. Because you fail doesn't make you a failure. What makes you a failure is when you fail and you don't get back up. So you've got to get up every time you fail and you keep going. And you just got to encourage this growth mindset, this courageous mindset. You've got to lead by example. You've got to demonstrate your courage in your actions and in your decision making and behavior, and that will inspire other people. That'll motivate other people to do the same thing. Romans chapter 12 and verse 2, one of my favorite passages, when we talk about retraining our minds, it says, be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. So we have to transform our mind. We got to renew our mind sometimes. David had worked on building a courageous mindset before he ever fought Goliath. You remember, there came a lion, he destroyed the lion. There came a bear, he defeated the bear. He worked on it. Now, he could have failed in those things, but it still would have helped him to build his courage and to have this courageous mindset. 1 Peter 1:13 says, wherefore gird up the loins of your mind and be sober, and hope to the end for the grace that is to be brought unto you at the revelation of Jesus Christ. Strategies are what we have to utilize to be able to lead with courage and boldness. So as we look at some of these strategies, let's keep that in mind. So first and foremost, you've got to seek God. Seek His Word for direction. Seek His Holy Spirit for guidance. But that's the first thing. In order to begin to lead with courage and boldness, you have to depend on the Lord. You need to spend time communicating openly. Be transparent with the people that you're leading. Be honest about the challenges that maybe you face. But it doesn't mean that in front of them, you're giving up or that you're conceding defeat. But you're being open and honest with them about the situation. And then you show confidence about how you're going to address those. You're going to share the vision that the organization has. You're going to explain maybe the rationale behind some of your decisions and what you're doing. And then the next thing you ought to do is you need to seek a lot of different perspectives, right? You got to encourage a lot of open dialogue within the organization so that you can listen to really different viewpoints. Embrace constructive criticism, foster an environment, even when you have differing opinions, and you got to value that. And next, you need to build a support network. You've got to surround yourself with trusted advisors or mentors. I'm big on mentoring. I'm big on, you should have a mentor in your life, and you should be a mentor to other people who can help provide guidance and give you support during these real challenging times, these times of opposition, these times of things that you're concerned about, you're fearful of. You want to get feedback from them. You want to learn from their experiences. And then you're going to have to learn how to take calculated risks. You've got to encourage maybe some innovation and creativity within your team. Be willing to kind of explore some maybe new ideas that you've never looked at before. Just because it's a new idea and you've never done it before doesn't mean it can't be successful. even if you've heard of other people being unsuccessful. You've got to look at the potential risks and look at them, assess them, and see what those risks are. And then look at the rewards if you take those risks. And before you make any decisions, you want to make sure you assess those things. And then the next thing that you want to do is you want to embrace constructive conflict. You have to be able to do that. You have to be willing to confront. You got to encourage really good, healthy debates. I'm not talking about getting personal. I'm talking about debating the facts and discussions within your team. And you need to really have a safe space where people can voice their concerns, and then there can be given good, constructive feedback. You need to have a place within your organization and be able to create a culture where people know that's allowed. And then you got to stay very focused and be resilient. You've got to maintain your vision. You got to clearly know what your vision and purpose is within your organization, even and especially in the face of opposition. You've got to know where you're headed. And then what you do is you adapt your strategies as you need to, based upon your commitment to your goals and to your vision and your purpose. You've got to be able to do that. And you've got to be able to embrace even setbacks. If you have a setback, embrace it, learn from it, use it as a learning opportunity, and then move ahead. And that's how you learn to lead with courage and boldness. And then there's going to be times when you have obstacles. And obstacles are going to be there. You can't help that. In life you have them, in business you have them. And so you've got to overcome them first by addressing whatever the fear you may have about that obstacle. You got to recognize it and acknowledge fear, both in yourself and even in your team members. So again, you have this open discussions about fears. You provide reassurance and support. Now, I'm not talking about pie in the sky. I'm talking about factual reassurance. And then you've got to develop those strategies to manage and overcome the fear. A lot of times you find in sports, a lot of these sports figures will talk about visualization techniques. They visualize themselves shooting the basketball at the three-point line and it going in. They visualize it. They visualize them making that play. They visualize them making that long putt. If they're in golf, they visualize these things. So what you've got to do is you use that visualization, or maybe you break down the task maybe into these smaller, maybe manageable steps. And sometimes you can just be one step away from great success, and then fear keeps you from it. You know, Matthew 14:22-31. Let me share this with you because I think this is so important. It says, "And straightway Jesus constrained his disciples to get into a ship and go before him unto the other side, while he sent the multitudes away. And when he had sent the multitudes away, he went up into a mountain apart to pray. And when the evening was come, he was there alone. But the ship now was in the midst of the sea, tossed with waves, for the wind was contrary. And in the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went unto them walking on the water. And when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were troubled. They were fearful, saying, It's a spirit. And they cried out in fear." Verse 27 says, "But straightway Jesus spoke unto them, saying, Be of good cheer, it is I, be not afraid. And Peter answered him and said, Lord, if it be thou, bid me to come unto thee on the water." Now first recognize he said, if it be you. He wasn't even sure it was him. He still had a lot of doubt. And that's what happens when fear comes in. It brings in doubt. And so Jesus said, "Come." And then Peter stepped down out of the boat, it says, verse 29, and he walked on the water to go to Jesus. But when he saw the wind boisterous, he was afraid. And beginning to sink, he cried, saying, Lord, save me. And immediately Jesus stretched forth his hand and caught him and said unto him, O thou of little faith, wherefore didst thou doubt? Now understand this. Fear causes a lot of doubt to come into our life. But what happened with Peter is you got to look at this. He had walked on the water enough that he had walked almost all the way to Jesus. because look at how close he was. He was so close to Jesus at that time. Jesus just reached down his hand and grabbed him. So that's how close that Peter got. He was one step away, and yet fear caused him to doubt, and then it caused him to sink. So that's what fear does. Now, the other thing that you've got to deal with besides fear is you've got to learn how to handle criticism. Opposition is going to come most of the time with criticism. And instead of taking it personally, you've got to look at criticism as maybe an opportunity maybe for growth or improvement. But you respond to criticism, I think, with grace and professionalism. You've got to address concerns. You got to provide your rationale for the actions that you're going to take. But you've got to know that you're going to be criticized. Zig Ziglar said one time, he said, "Don't be distracted by criticism. Remember, the only taste of success some people will have is when they take a bite out of you." So think about that. So you've got to be able to deal with criticism. The next thing is you've got to begin to walk by faith. You've got to walk by faith. Jerome Fleischman said, "The businessman who has faith is not very likely to go wrong. He's going to steer his ship of commerce through the troubled waters of misfortune, perhaps even adversity, with a serenity born of consciousness that nothing can harm him permanently, so long as he sees clearly and acts wisely. There will be many hands eager to retard his progress. Slander will raise its ugly head from many little by the ways along his path. Ill health may come, the loss of loved ones, the crippling of finances, the striking down of his most cherished hopes. And yet the man who has faith, who believes that right is right and will triumph because of it." So I think we have to learn to walk by faith in your decisions, in what you're doing, and you've got to have that confidence. And then you have to be willing to accept possible failure. Dennis Waitley said one time, he said, "Failure should be our teacher, not our undertaker. Failure is delay, not defeat. It is a temporary detour, not a dead end. Failure is something we can avoid only by saying nothing, doing nothing, and being nothing." So if you want to never fail, then just don't do anything. Don't say anything. Don't be anything, and you'll never fail. And so I think that's what Dennis was trying to say here. But I think you have to accept the fact that you may fail along the way, but that should not shake your courage or your boldness. And then you need to have confidence. Hebrews 13:6 says, "So that we may boldly say, 'The Lord is my helper. I will not fear what man shall do unto me.'" So you got to have confidence. Take time. Look at your past successes. I know that every single one of you have had successes. So you need to make sure that you look at those successes, rehearse them in your mind. And then you've got to take those calculated risks. We talked about that. Take the calculated risks. And then you have to have the courage at times to say no. You have to have the courage to say no. And then, because there's a lot of times when there are things that people are kind of prodding you to do. "Oh, I think this is the best way for the company to go. I think we need to do this in the business. I think we need to do this in the organization." When you know good and well it's not the right way to go, but you have so many people telling you that, you may want to tend to give in. But you've got to have the courage to say no. Not just the courage to act upon the things that you're doing, but you've got to take courage to be able to have enough courage, I should say, to say no at times and not let that worry you. And then lastly, you've got to make sure you live your vision and your values. You have to do that. You have to be willing to live your values. There's a story about a man named Dylan Stitch. And when he was young, he was wanting to dive off this diving board, but he was afraid. And his mom had said one time he had no interest in even trying to get off of jump off the diving board. They kept encouraging him, "Hey, just try it. Just give it a shot. Just give it a try." But he wouldn't. But then there was a man by the name of Daniel Biss, who was in the Air Force during World War II and the Korean War. And he knew a thing or two about fear and bravery. So when he saw this neighbor kid at the family pool party, and he happened to be there, And he had heard everybody trying to coax this young man off the diving board. And he knew exactly what this young man needed, this young child. And so Daniel, this 95-year-old, he just said he needed some convincing, he thought. So he just thought, you know what? He's going to give it a try. So Daniel, borrowed a swimsuit. He had his cane in his hand. Remember, he's 95. And he stepped up on that diving board to set an example. And this guy was a great-grandfather, right? So he hadn't been on a diving board in probably 50 years. Yet he stood up on this one, and he was ready to teach a lesson about courage, and which could have turned into a lesson of first aid, being 95 years old. But everybody held their breath, and everybody was real nervous. But the 95-year-old man, Daniel, he jumped off that diving board. He dived into the water. It wasn't real pretty, but he dove in. But he did it for Dylan. And so anyway, what happened, within minutes, Dylan got up on the diving board, and without any problem, he jumped and he dove in. And so he dove in, and he did that because of the courage that 95-year-old man showed him that he could also have. And so whatever you need to do, whatever leap that you need to make right now, I want you to know that you can do it. Leading with courage and boldness in the face of opposition is going to require a strong mindset. You're going to have effective communication. You're going to have the ability to navigate these challenges, and you're going to have to do it with some resilience. But I truly believe that by developing a courageous mindset and taking these calculated risks, I believe that leaders can inspire, they can empower others to follow. And addressing fear and handling criticism and building alliances, they're great steps and strategies in overcoming these obstacles maybe and leading with confidence. So remember, true leadership is not about avoiding opposition and difficulty, but it's about facing it head on with some determination and integrity. And by leading with courage and boldness, I believe you can take and create a positive impact. And I believe you can drive some real meaningful change, I think, within your team or organization. Lord, I thank you today for each and every person who listens to today's podcast. And Lord, if they're going through challenges today or opposition, I pray, Lord, that you help them to lead them through with courage and boldness and to not shrink back. Lord, help them to have confidence in you and have confidence in themselves. In the name of Jesus, amen. Well, thanks again for being a part of the Christian Business Concepts program and family. And if this podcast is ministered to you, I just asked that you would share it with maybe 2 or 3 other people and help us build this community where we're trying to teach Christian business concepts to help people find true godly success. We'd love for you to write us, if you would, at haroldm@christianbusinessconcepts.org. That's Harold M. at christianbusinessconcepts.org. And again, be sure to write a review for us. We'd love that. Well, that's all we have time for today. And until next time, I want you to remember, Jesus is Lord, and he wants you blessed.
Thank you for tuning into this week's Christian Business Concepts podcast. Go to christianbusinessconcepts.com for more information and resources. Be sure to check out other podcasts that will help you take your business and your personal life to a whole new level of success.